Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the New York State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Republican Party in Suffolk County. With us is our good friend, esteemed colleague, noted attorney, commentator, essayist Eric Levine. We're very delighted to have you back with us this week. In a little while, we're going to have Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, a Bronze Star winner, graduate of Harvard College, Harvard Law School, United States Senator from Arkansas, chairman of the Republican Conference, and chairman of the Republican Intelligence Committee in the United States Senate. We'll be having him in our second segment. I want to begin, gentlemen, talking about this whole issue of the progressive crowd seems to be eating its own. It's going after Senator Schumer, and I call this the resistance eats its own. Ironically, Elon Musk is also a victim of the revolution, or the resistance eating its own, because he was the golden boy for electric cars against gas vehicles. Everything was to be electrified. Musk was the hero, but Musk came in, try to help this country balance its budget, control out of control spending, fraud, waste, redundancy of programs. So let's turn our attention to Senator Schumer. Schumer has always been a liberal Democratic senator. He served as both minority and majority leader of the United States Senate. Before that, he was a member of the House of Representatives from New York. And before that, he was an assembly member. His entire career, he's been an elected public official. That's what Chuck Schumer is. That's what he does. And he loves politics. And everybody who knows anything about Chuck Schumer knows every Sunday he's doing another press conference on something to get himself out there. Chuck Schumer is notable for claiming to be the leader of the so-called moderate common sense Democrats, a friend of Israel, a defender of the Jewish community. But you wouldn't have the United States involved in the Iran nuclear deal but for Chuck Schumer. Now, he voted against it, but he voted against it because he knew all the votes were there for Obama's ridiculous policy. So on many levels, Chuck Schumer, to someone like me, a Democrat, has been an enormous disappointment. So what does he do? He finally does the right thing, and he does the right thing by supporting the continuing resolution, which stops any threat of a partial shutdown. And a partial shutdown, by the way, would have given the Trump administration a lot of power in terms of essential agencies and departments. It could have done more harm to the Democratic Party's interests than if they supported the continuing resolution. And there were about a total of 10 Democrats who voted for it. Therefore, the country is now being funded properly. Yet the crazy left wing of the Democratic Party wants to bury him. With respect to Musk, they want to have a day of rage, or whatever they want to call it, coming up on this Saturday, and they want to shut down all the Tesla dealerships. There's a piece of legislation being bandied about right now in the state legislature in New York. They want to take away Tesla's ability to do direct sales, which, as far as I'm concerned, is
good luck.
As far as they can pass it, and God knows what this governor will do in terms of signing it. But the fact is, I think it's totally unconstitutional for them to do that. Eric, your thoughts?
Well, Chuck Schumer has no moral core. He has no principles and no core beliefs. And if you try to be all things to all people, you end up being meaningless to everyone. And that's the position Chuck Schumer is currently in. You mentioned the JCPOA. It wasn't just so much that he waited to make sure that Obama had enough votes for the JCPOA before he came out against it. When he came out against it, in quotation marks, he specifically also said, it's a vote of conscience. I will not try to pressure anyone to vote one way or another. If there were a bill put on the floor to advance municipal unions or public employee unions, he would threaten to break everybody's kneecaps who didn't support that. So the idea that the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, a deal that had a legal path for Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon and to get over $100 billion in sanctions relief so it could fund its terrorist proxies and its military and threaten the existence of the state of Israel, that wasn't important enough for him to not just vote no and speak out against it. He voted yes and then just kind of let it go. So that was kind of the beginning of the downslope for Schumer. And this idea that he's a showman, a guardian of the protector of Israel, what a lot of hogwash that is, as we have seen since October 7th, when his reaction to the October 7th attack was, let's have new elections in Israel because Benjamin Netanyahu is responsible for the situation we're in. That was his reaction. When there was a embargo on Israeli weapons placed by the Biden administration, and he was asked about it, his response was, I trust the Biden administration. When there was an explosion, an absolute explosion of anti-Semitism on college campuses, Columbia being the primary place, but throughout New York colleges, CUNY, Cornell, Columbia, you name it, colleges throughout New York State, where he's the senator. Chuck Schumer went into the Witness Protection Program, and worse, he actually sent an email to the leadership of Columbia to just say, keep your head down, it'll go away, this is just a Republican issue. So he has offended the left, who he thought he could control, and Richard, to your point, he is now being consumed by the left. And he has offended Jews across the country and other righteous Gentiles across the country who believe that Israel has a right to exist, not just defend itself, but to win a war that threatens its existence. And he deserves everything he gets. But what does the left do? What are they so angry about most recently? Richard, you mentioned that, he voted to keep the government open. What did the left say he should have done? They said he should have used the filibuster to stop it. Well, I thought that the filibuster was a vestige of Jim Crow and racism. I mean, that's what the progressives have been telling us all the time when the Republicans wanted to keep the filibuster in place and Joe Manchin and Christian Sinema voted and sided with the Republicans to keep the filibuster in place. They were all called racist because the filibuster was a vestige of the Jim Crow racist South. So I guess now the progressives are racists. I mean, that's just the logical conclusion that we could draw. And then they're shouting, fight, fight, fight. Fight for what? What is it you're fighting for? That's really the Democrats' problem. They're not telling us what they're fighting for. They're fighting for that trans women can participate who are really biological men can play in women's sports. Is that what you're fighting for? You're fighting for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and social justice, which is inherently racist and anti-Semitic. Is that what you're fighting for? I'm not quite sure what they're fighting for, but I will say this. Chuck Schumer has worked very hard to earn the enmity of everyone, and he deserves it.
Jesse, your thoughts on Chuck Schumer, the attack on Schumer by the progressives, and the attack on Elon Musk by the progressives?
Honestly, if you look at the cast of characters that are involved in the attacks of Elon Musk and the attacks specifically on Schumer, we know who they are. They're the same band of individuals that pushed out and undertook a coup d'etat of Joe Biden and his presidency after his disastrous debate. It was the Nancy Pelosi who's coming out and saying, well, I would never give anything without getting anything back. It's the same individuals that, the elitists from Hollywood, the ones that the progressive left listened to on The View, Bernie Sanders, AOC, and the Squad. The same group of individuals that pushed Joe Biden out after they knew for 3 to 4 years that he was incapable of being president or seeking re-election, and they covered that up time and time again. They're the ones that are now turning their sights onto Chuck Schumer. Now, you can agree or disagree with what he did as a leader, not a leader like Chuck Schumer, but a leader protects his members. A leader protects his group. And that's why I believe that Chuck Schumer was thinking about doing, so that the members of his group who were privately saying there was no shutdown but wanted to vote for the shutdown because they're in danger of primaries or their elections coming up in 2026 and maybe even 2028, they needed someone to take the bullet. The problem with Chuck Schumer, why he finds himself in this position, includes everything that you said, Your Honor, what Eric said. I mean, the fact of how he is probably the most Jewish person I've ever seen in any time.
Well,
Soros.
Well, you
Don't
got
forget
Karl Marx and Leon Trotsky. They're in the running there.
And Schumer. All right, that's fine. Here's the thing, though. I mean, what a great choice you've given me. But we're speaking about Schumer specifically. Is that his biggest problem in this case that has earned him these cackles? And he earns this problem. He had no plan B. There was no plan B. He did not coordinate with Hakeem Jeffries in the House. Jeffries kept, as the minority leader, his entire group together except for one, so we make it bipartisan on this thing being passed from a congressman in Maine, right? But as we move forward, they took the bullet, and what made it even worse than not having a plan B is that he stood up on a Wednesday of that week before the vote on Friday and said, my caucus is not voting for this CR. That changed 24 hours later when the Republicans, united with another Democrat, approved a clean CR. That's where the problems began.
Yeah, he never thought the Republicans would stick together.
Right.
He never thought the Republicans would stick together.
Good point.
His hand of leverage would never exist. His hand of leverage in these negotiations were possibly 10 to 15 ultra-conservative Republicans of the caucus. But what happened was, through the good work of the president and the speaker, more importantly, Speaker Johnson, they got something through that needed to be done so that they all understood we needed time. The Trump administration and the Republican majorities needed time to truly enact all the legislation they want to do, and they couldn't do that with a shutdown government.
Let me ask you.
Also true.
Yeah, let me ask you this, Jesse, and I find this very, very troubling. You keep your eye on what's going on in the state legislature here, and you also keep your eye on what's going on nationally. This rage against Elon Musk, who's acting as a public servant, an unpaid public servant, who brought those hero astronauts back when the United States government could not do it on its own, at a cost to him of $160 million, I think the cost was. They're going after him. They want to have a day of rage. They want to shut down. They want to shut down Tesla. They want to shut down the business of Tesla. They want the stock to drop out. They want to bankrupt Musk just because they don't like what he's doing, and they want to go to the streets. There have been firebombs at the Tesla dealerships. There have been gunshots into Tesla dealerships.
This is terrorism.
This is domestic terrorism.
It's not just criminal.
Yeah,
it's terrorism.
But now the state legislature, controlled by the Democrats, want to take away something they lawfully gave him and he had a right to have after they voted it in. It was signed by the governor, allowing direct sales by Tesla to consumers. And now they want to rescind that and give it to his competitors. What are your thoughts on that, Jesse?
My thought is nothing new. These are the same Democrats that manipulate the election cycle because their failed policies in New York and in Washington and throughout the country are failing. They've failed the American people. They've failed the New Yorkers. Here in New York, we're the highest taxed. We have the lowest education rates in the country. It is abysmal to grow a business here or even grow a family here or keep our family together because of over-regulation. The Democrats in Albany and the Democrats who don't speak up, whether you're in Suffolk, Nassau, or anywhere in the region, if they don't speak up against this type of basic legislative terrorism of their own, because that they are complicit in that same nature. If you don't agree with me, we will suppress your ability to grow a company. We will put all of your employees out of work. Think about that.
How about the investments by the pension funds?
Or the investments by the pension,
Jobs,
or the
wealth. They just don't seem to care. There's a reason
They
why.
don't care. It's about political power. They are still in shock over their loss to President Trump and this wave of basic common sense coming across the country. Their wokeism is dead. Their ultra-progressive policies are dead.
Basically,
Everyone has shown them to be failures.
Basically, their point is, if we don't, you better vote for us, because if you don't, we're gonna riot, and we're gonna pillage, and we're gonna destroy your economy, and we're gonna destroy your way of life. That's not how you win elections. That's not what.
No.
That's not how democracy works. Make the better argument. When you have the better argument and the better policies, you win. But don't threaten us. That's what they've resorted to.
All right, this is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted commentator, essayist, and attorney Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us. We'll be back in but a few moments. And we're trying to connect with United States Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, one of the leading members of the United States Senate. And we'll be back in a few moments. Stay tuned.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg, and we're honored and privileged today to have one of the great United States senators in our country, Tom Cotton of the state of Arkansas. Senator Cotton is a Bronze Star winner, an awardee of Afghanistan. He has written a number of books. His most recent book is called 7 Things You Can't Say About China. He's chairman of the Intelligence Committee of the United States Senate, as well as being chairman of the Republican Caucus. A wonderful United States senator, a great leader on foreign policy, national security, someone who's often talked about either for the presidency or the vice presidency or the Supreme Court or Secretary of Defense. As far as I'm concerned, Senator Cotton can have all of them in any order he wants. So, Senator, welcome to Let the Record Show. We're honored and privileged again to have you with us.
Well, thank you, Judge. It's very good to be on with you. Good to be on with Eric and Jess as well. I appreciate the kind introduction. But before I take any new jobs, I just want to stress how happy and thankful I am that the people of Arkansas have entrusted me to serve them in the United States Senate, and that I have a chance to serve my fellow Republicans in the Senate. It's their number 3 leadership job as the conference chair. I think we're doing great things in Washington these days, helping implement Donald Trump's agenda through the Republican Congress and Senate, and look forward to even better days ahead.
Eric.
Well, Senator, thank you for being with us. I'm honored to be able to call you a friend. I'm always very proud to stand with you on issues of mutual interest, and it's more times than not. In fact, I can't think of a time we haven't agreed on a particular issue. But I'd like to talk about your new book, 7 Things You Can't Say About China. Now, I'm going to date myself a little bit. When I first read the title, the first thing that came to my mind was George Carlin and 7 Words You Can't Say on TV. But we won't say it on the radio show.
I actually litigated that case, by the way,
Did
giving
you?
my age away. Go ahead. And lost.
But
Lost.
it's one of the great comedy skits of all time, if anyone wants to listen. But when you were asked about your book, you made the statement, as a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, I'm often asked if the threat from China is as bad as it seems. My answer is no, it's worse than you can imagine. So what did you mean by that?
Well, Eric, most Americans rightly hold China in a very low opinion. If you look at public opinion polls like me, you travel around my state, travel around the country, there are very few Americans in their normal walks of life you'll encounter who have a high opinion of China. But what I've found in 10 years on the Armed Services Committee and the Intelligence Committee, now chairing the Intelligence Committee, is that still most Americans don't appreciate how immediate and how pervasive the threat from China is. This is not a remote, speculative threat in the future in some kind of grand strategic fashion. It's a threat every day to you, to your family, to our way of life, in addition to those grander, more strategic threats. And this book, which is relatively small and a fast read, is designed to ring the alarm bell, to tell the American people exactly about the nature of that threat, how we got here, and what we can do about it.
So one of the great threats, obviously, that's facing the country is the thought of the Chinese invasion of Taiwan. How real is that threat? And if it's a real threat, what do you think the timing of that is?
Well, it's a very real threat, guys. And as I say in the book, one of the things you can't say about China is that China's preparing for war. They've undertaken the biggest peacetime buildup of the military in the history of mankind, and it's all geared towards going for the jugular in Taiwan, trying to blockade, quarantine Taiwan, or invade and annex it, or to achieve that without even having to fight a war in the first place. And that is a grave threat to the United States and our interests. Douglas MacArthur said at the outset of the Korean War that Taiwan was the unsinkable aircraft carrier and submarine tender off the coast of China. Still is, always will be, because geography never changes. He also said it would be a disaster of utmost importance if it fell into hostile hands. Then, as now, communist China. But it's even more so now because in addition to being that unsinkable aircraft carrier and submarine tender, in addition to being a place where America has put security guarantees into law, it is the global hub for semiconductor manufacturing. 60% of all semiconductors in the world are made there, over 90% of all advanced semiconductors. And there's really no walk of life. There's no industry. There's no job that's vital to America's livelihood that doesn't depend on those chips. So any kind of conflict over Taiwan would probably bring about an immediate Great Depression. You'd see massive unemployment of the kind that probably no living American seen, stock market collapses, wiping out the life savings of many Americans, shortages on shelf stores all across the country. Why would China risk that? It would hurt because it would hurt them too. They would risk that because they think Taiwan is the final linchpin they need to replace the United States as the world's dominant superpower. And the stakes, therefore, couldn't be any higher. This is not just some historical grievance that communist China wrongly thinks they need to right, but it's a matter of the greatest strategic importance. And the only way to prevail in a conflict over China is to be sure we don't have to fight one in the first place. As Churchill said over 100 years ago, in modern war, the victors will suffer almost as much as the vanquished. That would definitely be true in Taiwan. So what we need to do there is to be strong, be resolute, be confident, and ensure that we deter communist China from ever thinking it could win that prize in the first place.
Well, to that point, on the bad news side, at least correct me if I'm wrong, America is not militarily prepared to face the challenges internationally that we are facing. Our military is being depleted. We don't have the planes we need. We don't have the ships we need. We don't have the service members we need to be able to fight a war in Taiwan or to confront the Chinese. Certainly not to be able to fight a two-front war, which has been the benchmark of American preparedness since the Second World War. I mean, first, do you agree with that assessment? And secondly, if you do, what is it we need to do to get to the point where we can stare down China and prevent them from invading Taiwan?
Yes, sadly speaking, guys, our military is not well postured to fight and win that war in Taiwan today. I've seen lots of war games, as I write in 7 Things You Can't Say About China. None of them have a happy ending. Not all of them result in defeat outright, but none of them have a happy ending. Our military is probably a little bit better than it was 8 years ago when Donald Trump took office the first time, because we had 4 years of the Trump rebuild. But it was once again neglected for 4 years in the Biden era. The only thing you can say about that, it wasn't 8 years, which is where it was neglected during the Obama era. So there's no doubt that we need to increase our defense budget. we also need to make sure that we're spending that money smartly on the kinds of weapons and the kind of systems that are going to help us deter conflict in the Western Pacific. That's exactly what Donald Trump said last week when he announced that we're going to build the next generation of manned fighters, working alongside unarmed drones and wingmen, but to be ready to deter China's next generation of manned fighters. These are the kind of investments we have to make, stay on the cutting edge of military power to make sure, once again, that China never thinks it should take a shot at the title in Taiwan.
All right, Jesse, your question for Senator Cotton.
Senator, it's a pleasure to be here. And number one, thank you for your service as a member of our military, and of course on the floor of the Senate. You've truly been a champion for the American people and American way of life. Well, in speaking of China, let's bring it home a little bit. We've had over the 4 years of the Joe Biden administration, Chinese balloons flying over the American airspace with impunity. We've had incursions by them. What is the threat internally, from an intelligence point of view, from what you can speak of China's attempts of disinformation, of activism to try and sow violence within our communities, or separate us or divide us as a country and as a people?
Well, the threat of Chinese influence is pervasive. As I write in 7 Things You Can't Say About China, it's not just traditional espionage. It's not the kind of spy versus spy games that you see in great movies about the Cold War. It is that, of course. China does, of course, engage in traditional espionage in Washington against intelligence officers, military personnel, and so on and so forth. It does the same thing in corporate America in a way that Soviet Russia never did, still intellectual property and other things. But also has vast hacking operations, for instance. It tries to hack into government computers in a traditional espionage fashion. It tries to hack into corporate computers to, once again, engage in corporate espionage. It uses hacking to emplace certain tools in critical infrastructure. Again, something that Soviet Russia didn't do, but also just has so much influence in American society. That is something that Russia did not have during the Cold War because we were largely separate economic spheres. Our economy is so entangled in the Chinese economy now, it allows China just pressure points every single day. If you remember, the general manager of the Houston Rockets tweeted out that we should stand with Hong Kong as they were fighting for their freedom. And China came down on them like a ton of bricks. But so did the NBA. Some of the owners, like the owner of the Brooklyn Nets, said that that this should not have happened. And then, surprisingly, his own CEO was out of a job a few months later. ESPN, which is owned by ABC, which is owned by Disney, which is deeply exposed to China because of its need to get into Chinese movie studios and its amusement parks in China, never reported on this controversy, certainly not in a way that would reflect poorly on China. It's just one example of the pressure points that Communist China has throughout our society. I could give you 100 more because the threat of Chinese influence operations against the United States in favor of China is pervasive. It's happening every single day.
Senator, I want to switch
gears. How do we
gears.
stem that, if I may ask? I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Go ahead,
How do we
Jesse.
stem that?
Well, one, you need to expose it. So many people, as I've been telling the book over the last couple months, had no idea that they had not watched a movie with a Chinese villain for at least 28 years, since 7 years in Tibet. As soon as I tell them that, though, it dawns on them, yeah, that's right. Even though we're engaged in this struggle against the communist power, despite the great Hollywood movies like Rocky IV or Red Dawn that the Cold War produced, there's never a movie with a Chinese villain or that even reflects poorly on the Chinese. And again, why is that? It's because Hollywood studios all have to have access to the lucrative Chinese movie market. And as I alluded to with ABC, so is the case with every major news network other than Fox. They're all owned by or affiliated with Chinese or Hollywood studios who are exposed to Chinese pressure because of access to the Chinese movie market. And again, I could give you example after example after example. One, it's important to point them out. Two, it's important that we undertake a smart and strategic decoupling of critical areas that China can no longer have leverage over us, so we can reduce some of these pressure points, like, for instance, basic pharmaceuticals or certain electronics and certain processed minerals that we need in any modern economy. That's what I call for in 7 Things You Can't Say About China.
Senator, I want to switch gears. I want to talk to you about and get your thoughts on what I see to be, at this moment in time, the most immediate and direct threat, and that's Iran getting nuclear weaponry. How close are they to having it? What should the Trump administration be doing about that? Is it a problem that can be solved by the Trump administration?
I believe that it's a problem that can be solved by Donald Trump, absolutely. And I believe it's coming to a head soon. President Trump has said so repeatedly in public. And I think that's because you have both a moment of unique peril, but also a moment of unique opportunity. The peril is that, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, Iran could have enough uranium for at least a testable, if not a workable, nuclear device within no more than a matter of months, maybe a few weeks. They already have the kind of missiles that can deliver those anywhere in the Middle East, to include to our friend Israel. Maybe most ominously, and something that I think, again, that most Americans haven't been fully informed of, Iran has a space launch program, which is flimsy cover for an intercontinental missile program. And those missiles could probably hit the United States itself in fewer than 5 years, maybe fewer than 3 years. So the threat is not just to our friends in the region, but also to the United States itself. That's the unique peril. The unique opportunity is that Iran is exposed and weaker, more so than it has been since the end of the Iran-Iraq War in 1988, because of Israel's great success against it. Israel has devastated Hezbollah and Hamas, Iran's 2 great proxy threats to Israel. The United States is doing a great job right now of devastating the rebels in Yemen who have been shooting missiles and drones into Israel for the last 18 months. And Israel, in its strikes on Iran, retaliating against Iran in October, Iran hitting Israel, devastated Iran's air and missile defenses. So Iran is largely exposed right now. And the president, as he has said publicly, sent a letter to the supreme leader. And he said that we can't have Iran with nuclear weapons. And we can do it one of 2 ways. We can do it through a deal, or we can do it, as he says, the other way. And he gave him 60 days to see if he's serious about a deal. We know what a good deal would look like. It wouldn't look like Barack Obama's deal. It would look like 2003 in Libya, when we scared Muammar Gaddafi straight and he threw open the doors and said, come take it all. But President Trump has been very clear in public for 10 years, really, that we can never allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Things are simply coming to a head very soon.
Yeah, I think the American people should understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that the JCPOA was a gift to Iran. It created a legal path to a nuclear weapon. It gave sanctions relief of over $100 billion to allow Iran to fund its terror proxies and to fund its hegemonic goals in the region. It gave Iran a free path to a ballistic missile system to deliver a ballistic missile that could land in the United States. So it is a direct threat to those of us here from New York to Los Angeles. But the question becomes, the other way is whether or not that is just a unilateral Israeli attack with American diplomatic and military, providing military munitions and providing diplomatic cover, or is it a joint attack by the United States along with our Israeli allies? I happen to think the most effective is a joint attack because we have capabilities the Israelis simply don't have. And while the Israelis could push the Iranian nuclear program back years, only we can destroy it for all time. So would you support a joint American-Israeli attack on Iran's nuclear facilities?
I have long said that if it's necessary to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons, then the United States should take it upon itself to ensure that doesn't happen. As you say, Israel obviously is very powerful and has brought Iran to its knees over the last year. But the United States does have unique capabilities, as we've seen in the attacks on these Yemeni rebels from the Red Sea over the last 2 weeks. Notably, what Israel does not have that we have is one, refueling tankers that could support this kind of mission. They're going to get them soon, I've worked for years to try to accelerate the delivery of those K-46 tankers, to get Israeli pilots here in America now, to get them trained so their training matches the same timeline of the tanker delivery. But those are not going to be delivered in a relevant time horizon. That's probably something that's still a couple years away, not something that's going to be done in the next few weeks. Second, we have heavy bombers with the heaviest, most deeply penetrating kinds of bombs. So there's no question that while Israel has a formidable military that has inflicted severe damage on Iran over the last year, the United States could increase that significantly.
Well, to your earlier point about that something's going to happen soon, the 60-day window, the Ayatollah himself has said he's not interested in talking to the United States, which I find is a relief because these talks always just seem to drag out. So I'm glad the Ayatollah said no. And I think our listeners should know there may be people as supportive of the American-Israeli relationship in Congress as Senator Cotton, but there's nobody who is more supportive of the American-Israeli relationship. And I would say that with pride that senators has been someone that I've supported for all these years, in part because of that. And the support for Israel is because, in large part, they share our values, and because Senator Cotton, correct me if I'm wrong, it's because a strong Israel represents a strong America. It enhances our national security. So support for the Jewish state isn't just a gift. It's something that's necessary to American national security.
Senator, I just want to get you, we just have a few moments left. I just want to get your thoughts. When the Ayatollahs say, when that regime says, death to Israel, death to America, why don't we pay attention to that? When somebody tells you they want to kill you, why aren't we paying attention to that, Senator?
That's a very good question. As I sometimes point out, they call Israel the little Satan because they call us the big Satan. And they see us both for what we are. We are the beacons in the world of free, self-government, democratic peoples who respect the rights of our individuals, which is antithetical to their radical Islamist worldview. And while Israel is closer and perhaps more of an immediate irritant, the ultimate great Satan in their worldview is the United States, and it has been since the moment they took power in 1979 and took our fellow Americans hostage for more than 400 days.
Yeah, Americans should also remember that Iran is responsible for 1/3 of the dead, American dead and wounded in Iraq and Afghanistan, directly.
Senator, on behalf of Chairman Jesse Garcia, our friend Eric Levine, and myself, it's been an honor and privilege having you on this week's Let the Record Show. We hope this is the third book you've written that I'm aware of, the others being Sacred Duty and Only the Strong. I'm running out to get the 7 things you can't say about China because I don't like sleeping, and this will keep me scared awake. So I'm going to get that book, and I commend that to everybody to read. But I look forward to having you back on the show, and I look forward to your next book and your continued leadership in the Senate. Thank you for joining us, Senator.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
Smartwater Alkaline with antioxidant. 9.5 plus pH, now in cans.
Refreshing.
Made for every way you move.
Should I run a marathon?
Let's start with finishing that water. Smartwater Alkaline with antioxidant, now in a sleek can. For those with a taste for taste. Grab yours today.
ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party. Jesse is the New York State Republican Party and the county chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. This is noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine, and we've just had the pleasure and the privilege of having United States Senator, who is the chairman of the United States Senate Intelligence Committee, the number 3 ranking Republican in the Senate, being chair of the Republican Conference, a strong voice for a strong America, and a fighter for protecting Western civilization against the Islamist threat emanating from Iran, and, of course, the great threat, based on his new book, 7 Things You Can't Say About China, the great threat of China to the United States. So I want to switch gears with you, Jesse and Eric, and I want to talk to you about something that I find very troubling, and I call this the overreaching federal judges. So let me set the stage for this discussion. There are approximately 700 United States District Court judges in the United States. These are positions that are created legislatively. They're not in the Constitution. The powers of U.S. District Court judges can be dealt with, raised or limited or modified either by statutory amendment by the Congress or even by the Supreme Court of the United States by the rules governing the U.S. District Courts. So there are possibilities of dealing with that. Now, why does this come troubling to me? Because there's something called the national injunction, and that means that any United States District Court judge, wherever he or she may be sitting, can issue an injunction that can block action not just in the district, the geographic district to which that person has been appointed,
or the parties to the
or the parties to that's exactly right, or to the litigants before
the court,
but to the whole country. And this national injunction is very troubling. There's been arguments about this going back over 100 years. And I'm against these national injunctions. Why? Because they're used as partisan political devices to impede the agendas of administrations. Whether it's a Democratic administration or a Republican administration, it doesn't matter. U.S. District Court judges should not have the power to block the executive branch of government from carrying out its mandates and its obligations under the United States Constitution. So Trump has tried to fire people. He's tried to deport gang members with threats to the country who are a terrorist organization. He's tried to cut off funding for the United States, the AID funding for foreign governments and not for non-government organizations. He's trying to bring forth national security, protecting our border, economic efficiency, avoiding waste and corruption and fraud in our spending, and you have these judges going forth and doing that. So the most recent example of this, which I find very troubling, and just yesterday on a 2-1 vote, there's a judge named Boasberg in U.S. District Court, District of Columbia. He's the chief judge of that court. And he's a partisan judge. His wife and daughters are big supporters of the Democratic Party. He's been to conferences which are geared to doing one thing only, which is to rein in a Trump administration. He's been at those junkets with this group. So he should recuse himself. He shouldn't be on these cases. Now he's got about 4 cases in the U.S. District Court in District of Columbia. And the most recent case, the one I'm most troubled about, is the deportation of these members of the Venezuelan gangs who are an imminent threat. They're a terrorist group. And it's under the powers of the President of the United States and any invasion or any threat to the United States national security and the influence of foreign policy to get them out of this country. And Boasberg issues a temporary restraining order, tells the administration, not only can't you deport them, but this plane that's in the air, you have to turn it around and bring it back. And the United States Court of Appeals, on a technical procedural issue, says, well, the government hasn't made out its case why this is a matter of national security. So 2-1, the temporary restraining order stays in place. I respectfully submit to you, Jesse and Eric, that it's not for a U.S. District Court nor for the Court of Appeals to say that they haven't made out the threat. If the President of the United States and Secretary of State say this is an imminent threat, these are dangerous, it's a terrorist organization, they have the right to do it. What say you, Eric?
Well, people should keep in mind that foreign nationals or people here, more importantly, people who are here illegally, do not have the same due process rights and First Amendment rights and Fifth and 14th Amendment rights as an American citizen. So some of these laws, I think, do put them beyond the jurisdiction of the district courts. But having said that, when a district court rules, the answer to that is not impeachment or ignoring it; it's appeal. And we've discussed this. I think in last week's show. I think the Trump administration should for the moment be bound by whatever the court rules, and then appeal it and get these decisions reversed. To your point about these nationwide injunctions, 100% right. That has to change. That has to change. I mean, the Congress needs to pass legislation that prevents that. Maybe you have a panel of district court judges that has to by unanimous decision impose a nationwide injunction. There are all kinds of possibilities, but to have a single judge, district court judge, sitting in Hawaii, being able to tell the president of the United States how to conduct foreign policy is insane. It's just not appropriate. But it gets to the difference. We've discussed this before as well. The difference between the Democrats' perception of what the judiciary is and the Republicans' perception. And the Democrats, in many ways, view the judiciary as a super legislature, that if we can't win at the ballot box, then we're going to go to these judges and we're going to have them legislate. Now, the only thing more dangerous than that thought process is a judge who actually thinks that they can legislate. But that's what we are seeing. And this really has to stop. But again, by appeal. And the Supreme Court, it would be nice if... I supported Justice Roberts when he made the point that it was very important to follow the process and don't ignore the courts, appeal, and eventually get to the Supreme Court and will rule. But I think it would also be helpful if Justice Roberts were to issue a statement decrying these nationwide injunctions and calling for them to be reformed and perhaps proposing ways for them to be reformed, because this has to stop. It's not good for the country. It's not how it's supposed to work. The executive has special powers, and he needs to be able to use them to keep the country safe.
Jesse, your thoughts?
Yeah, gentlemen, I completely agree. And I think that, as you said, the district federal courts are not in the Constitution. They were done legislatively, and there needs to be some reform enacted there. And I think one of the best solutions, or at least ideas that have come forward, is from Speaker Johnson in the House of Representatives, who has said that he is contemplating legislation to do that very thing, is to stop the activism at the district court level, which has been hamstringing cases, for decades, but more specifically this time. I mean, I think there was a chart on Fox News where there have been like 64 injunctions against Trump policies or actions during his...
Every day, Jesse, you pick up the paper, you listen to the news, there's another injunction, right.
What I also find...
We should enjoin the injunctions. That's the solution.
Well said.
Enjoin the injunctions.
Exactly. The other thing is that it's clear that the Democrats, and with this judge specifically, are judge shopping. They're seeing where they have a friendly court. They're seeing where they can get whether it's public relations or whether it's an enactment of these injunctions, and they're going specifically to these forums so that the same judge that has been, is an activist, as you pointed out, has been involved and went to seminars where they spoke about these type of issues, whose family is actively involved in Democratic policies. They're shopping for the judge if they want. But I think all three of us agree with one thing as well. Not only does this thing need reform to stop these national injunctions, but we also need to protect and respect the institution of it. Impeachment is not the way. We should just go through the process. And I think Speaker Johnson jumping out front on this actually has helped, I believe, the Trump administration and his actions moving forward by stating so.
I agree with that. And just for our audience to know, Speaker Johnson, someone who I watched on television over the years, long before he became the powerful Speaker of the House, and I used to listen to him, and I was always taken by his dignity, his intelligence, his rationality. Very thoughtful, learned attorney. He really knows his stuff. He's a great constitutional lawyer, and I appreciate that. We have a few minutes left. I just want to raise this issue with both Jesse and Eric. you've had all these instances of domestic terrorism going on, whether it's on college campuses or the Tesla dealerships or blocking subways or Penn Station or bridges, threatening people, death threats. And that the commentators and members of the administration always talk about this as being domestic terrorism. And they're correct. It is domestic terrorism. This is not First Amendment protected speech. This isn't the right to lawfully assemble. This is terrorism to intimidate, to harass, for control, for domination. But what we don't have, and very few people know this, there is no such thing in the United States of America as a federal domestic terrorism law. And I submit to you, gentlemen, both of you, Jesse and Eric, that now is the time, while you still have a Republican-controlled House and Senate and an occupant of the White House who understands this terrorism threat domestically, it's time to enact a federal domestic terrorism law. Eric, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm all for it. I'm not sure it can get through. I guess it depends on what it says, because the Democrats do have the filibuster in the Senate. I'm confident that we could get one through the House, and I'm confident if it got to the president's desk, he would sign it. I'm not sure it can get through the Senate.
So they vote to stop it. What are they supporting domestic terrorism?
Well,
How do you make that argument? What's the narrative on that?
Well, I mean, let's look what's going on at Columbia University.
Exactly.
Right. The Trump administration has said we're not going to. You have to fight anti-Semitism, and we're going to withdraw. We're going to withhold $400 million. And so you have an administrators, and faculty that actually come out into the public and encourage the students to wear masks, in contravention of what the university supposedly agreed to, and to protest and demand that the $400 million, be paid. So when they're confronted with, when Democrats and progressives are confronted with the choice of, we will give up $400 million to preserve the right to be able to be anti-Semitic, rather than we'll fight anti-Semitism so we can get $400 million. That's the mindset. That's the mindset. They have a very different worldview than we do, because our worldview is let's keep America strong, equal opportunity for all. Theirs is the social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda, which is anti-American, which is inherently racist and inherently anti-Semitic. And if you have an anti-terrorism law, it makes it more difficult to be able to support things like anti-Semitism. So that's kind of the mindset for some of these Looney Tunes. So I don't profess to be able to read the minds of crazy people, but that seems to be what they're saying.
Well, we're going to have to sign off. Next week, we're going to do a whole inquiry on how to control the minds and look into the minds of crazy people.
Crazy people.
And that discussion will be led off by Chairman Garcia. This has been Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted commentator, attorney, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. I want to thank you for listening. We hope you've enjoyed today's discussion. God bless you. God bless your families. And, of course, God bless America. Thank you for listening.